Everyone, and welcome to my talk on teaching in 2020, challenges and opportunities. And I'm sure all of you, like me, will be feeling the challenge at the moment because it's exhausting, isn't it? It's a year unlike any other. First of all, we had that period of lockdown where everything was really, really tough, trying to teach our students when they were at home and they didn't necessarily have the tech they needed. They didn't necessarily engage at home in the way we want them to. And even if they did, it was really hard to assess them. All those things were really challenges. And at the time, I said, this is like the hardest thing I've ever done. I've never taught online before. It's really, really tough. I just want school to be open again. And I'm sure we all said that. And now schools are open again. Now we're saying, hey, this is really, really tough. I've never done anything this hard. And I'm sure for most of you are having a really similar experience to me. So when I say tough, I mean physically exhausting. All the changing rooms all the time, lots and lots of duties, all the different bubbles we're teaching in, but also the challenges to our pedagogy and how we can cope with that kind of really unusual situation we find ourselves in, where things that we're so used to doing in teaching in many schools have been taken away from us. So challenge is definitely the word, and I'm sure like me, you're all feeling a little bit tired at the moment. But opportunities, there are many, and this is actually a really exciting time to be a teacher. I'm going to talk to you about some of the positives we can take from this very unusual situation. Now, I want to share this picture, which was taken in my school a couple of weeks ago, and just have a look at it for a minute and think about what you see in this picture. Just to give you some background, this is one of my NQTs at my school. So we recruited him during lockdown. We recruited him on Zoom. So not a proper interview, and we didn't get to see him teach when we recruited him, and he had half a training year. And this is a picture taken in his lesson a couple of weeks ago with year 7. So you might look at this picture and think, well, he's not teaching in a maths classroom. I mean, maybe you can't tell that, but I know he's not teaching in a maths classroom. He's teaching in an English classroom because we were using bubble corridors, and year 7 lessons are all in English classrooms. So perhaps he doesn't have the equipment he's used to. Perhaps he doesn't have perhaps the sort of usual environment is not what we'd expect. He's there. You might see that black line across the floor at the front, which he's just creeped over, but that's okay. So that line indicating that we're not allowed to leave the front of the classroom. We can't circulate. That's the big issue. We can't circulate around the room, and we have to stay in our box at the front. And you might think, oh, this NQT, he's lost half his training year. He's not had the support and the mentoring that our normal trainees receive. But if we look at the positives, I see a really confident teacher with great body language, a teacher who's enjoying that lesson, a teacher who is running a really engaging activity. I'll tell you what he's doing here. He is he's got a class that he's trying to improve their understanding of negatives with this lovely number line activity. He's asking them to come up with things that they like in their life and things they don't like, and rank them on a scale where they can use negatives as well as positive numbers. And if you read the boards, there's some lovely stuff. There's a girl there who's put kind of something like cappuccino as 1,000. And then some of the things they've put as negative 1,000 are really funny, and the sort of range of scores they're using is really interesting. So sort of that idea of a negative 10 being worse than a negative 8 is a really lovely activity. Some of you might be thinking, oh, mini whiteboards, we don't have those. And actually at my school we have allowed mini whiteboards. Students have their own mini whiteboards, or they're using the one in the back of their planner, and we've given them all an individual pen. When we first thought we couldn't teach without mini whiteboards, we said, no, we just can't do that in maths. We have to find a way, and we have. I see a room full of really engaged students. They love being at school. All that time where they were away from school, they missed it. The majority of students realised how much they enjoy being at school, and what I see there is a class of happy faces. And I see maths being taught in person, and that's wonderful. After that long period where we weren't able to teach maths in person because we were teaching maths online, and we missed it so much. And isn't it wonderful to be back teaching maths where we belong? It really does feel good. So we could see some challenges in this picture, but we can also see a lot of positives. Now let's have a think about some of the things that people are saying are particularly challenging for them at the moment, and think about how we can make the best of those things. So one of the things that a lot of people are sort of finding very difficult is the moving between classrooms. And I think in most schools this is a situation where you'll teach, say, a maths lesson in a humanities room, and then you have to run across the school and teach a maths lesson in an English classroom. And then so there's lots and lots of moving. It's quite tiring, lots of carrying boxes around. And people are saying that one of the challenges is that start of the lesson, because we're not there to greet our students at the door. They're often in the room before we arrive. And then we really don't have that kind of smooth start to the lesson that we'd like. You know, we need to log in, we need to get out, if we've got PowerPoint, we need to get that up on the board, getting the resources sorted. It takes a while. So perhaps that's a challenge. But if we look at the sort of the solution to that, a lot of schools have introduced warm-up booklets, and it's certainly something we've done at my school, and I am loving the warm-up booklets. I'll explain how we're doing it at my school. So in the summer holidays, I created these booklets for each of my classes. So this is my Year 9 warm-up booklet. And essentially they are knowledge retrieval starters, which is what I was doing anyway last year. The difference is that last year I'd either just have them on my PowerPoint or I'd hand them out at the beginning of the lesson. I can't have them on my PowerPoint anymore because it takes me a few minutes to get my PowerPoint set up and all the students are already there, and I can't hand them out at the start of the lesson because, again, I haven't got that time to waste. When I arrive, they're all sitting there. I want them working before I arrive. So this year I made these warm-up booklets, got them all sorted in the summer holidays, and then the ones I've made are for the first half term. So there are 24 warm-ups in my booklet, half a page each, so it's not a big booklet, it's only 12 sheets, it's not like a really thick chunky thing to print. And then I've got my students to put them in the front of their exercise books using treasury tags. So we have these A4 plus exercise books. So they've all got their warm-up booklet right in the front of their exercise book. They know exactly where to find it. And their instruction has been made very clear to them. When I arrive at the lesson, I expect to see them all working on their warm-up booklet. And that is working brilliantly. I arrive, and unless I've had a free period beforehand, so in which case I just come in and say, right, get your warm-up booklets out. But if I arrive having come from another lesson, so I'm running a couple of minutes behind them, they are all working. They know exactly what to do. It's crystal clear. So that's what my typical warm-ups look like in that booklet. This is a kind of borderline higher foundation set. We haven't decided which tier we're going to enter them in for, just to give you an idea on the level of the class. And that's my first warm-up of the year that they did. So there's some knowledge retrieval, there's some kind of factual recall in there. But the important bit here is that middle section on volume. So let me just explain what we're doing there, because that's something that my school is very specifically putting into our warm-ups. Volume was one of our lockdown topics. So that's one of the topics that when this year group were Year 8 last year in the summer term, we were meant to teach them volume. And instead they all did it at home on Hegarty Maths. But we know that about half our students did everything at home. And most of our students did some stuff at home, but some students did nothing at home. And I'm sure most schools are similar. So that means that I know that some of them just didn't do volume, and we can't have them just not having had done that. But we also don't want to spend time reteaching something when some of them did do it. So we don't want to kind of punish the ones that did all their work during lockdown by making them do these topics again. So what we're doing is we're putting them in our retrieval booklets. So the students in this first lesson would have had a go at that question on cuboids, and when I went through it, I was assessing their understanding and then sort of doing a little bit of teaching of that topic sort of very quickly at the start of the lesson. Right, you all should have done this in lockdown, so let's just see whether you can remember how to do this, and then I go through it. If you didn't do this in lockdown, then you really need to be listening to me right now, because this is stuff you were meant to do in Year 8. So we've got that kind of re-teaching of lockdown topics coming in through our starters. So then the second warm-up for that class, again some mixed retrieval, but that middle section is carrying on with that lockdown topic. And then more on that the next day. So by this point, they should be sort of understanding that key point about volumes of cuboids. And then I move on to volumes of prisms. Now this was really interesting because I did this one a couple of weeks ago, and most of them said, Miss, what's a cross-section? Now they were meant to have done volume while they were at home in the summer term, and yet pretty much no one in my class knew what the word cross-section meant. So that was really interesting, and I got to address that, and in the next lesson they had to use that cross-section to find the volume of a prism. So I kind of anticipated that. I knew that might have been an issue, and then when we got to this warm-up, I was able to go through how we find volumes of prisms. And the next day they had another volume of prisms, so they could have remembered what I told them the day before. So you get the idea. My warm-up booklets are retrieval practice. They are solving a practical issue, which is the fact that I need students working before I arrive. But they're also enabling me to do little bits of reteaching and assessment of the topics students were meant to do during lockdown. And that has been really helpful, us addressing any gaps without slowing everyone down. It's really, really working well. So if we look at the silver lining, our big issue was we're moving between classes and that's ruining the start of our lessons. But our silver lining is that, first of all, my lessons are quicker to plan now because I made all those booklets in the summer holidays. So that means that my year 7, 8 and 9 classes that I teach, because I'm in a brand new school, so I only teach 7, 8 and 9, but it means that I'm not having to plan starters each lesson because I've done all that. So my lessons are actually a bit quicker to plan. My retrieval practice, I thought about it really carefully when I made those booklets. So normally I just shove a load of retrieval stuff into my slides and I don't really think much about it. Whereas this took a bit more thought because I wasn't doing it in a rush. I'm addressing those lockdown gaps through my warm-ups, and that is working brilliantly. And I feel that my lessons are actually starting smoother than last year. Because they can all work before I get there, and because I don't have to do any setup at the start of the lesson, they're all working on their warm-up booklets while I do the register and get my laptop set up and all those things. And actually I feel that this is a massive improvement on what I've done previously. So I'm going to say that these warm-up booklets for me are here to stay. I will be using these for the foreseeable future, even when we stop having to move between classrooms. I don't know why I didn't do it before. So that is a massive silver lining to the situation we currently find ourselves in. Another issue that people are talking about at the moment is that they can't circulate when their students are working. They can't walk around the classroom. Now, in some schools they can, because perhaps they can wear a mask and a visor and then they can walk around the classroom. In my schools, the TAs wear visors. I don't wear a visor or a mask, and so I stay at the front. Perhaps if I want to circulate, I can put a visor on and circulate. The thing I'm finding the big issue with not circulating is not only not knowing whether they understand things, but also finding it hard to judge the timing of my tasks. Because normally, say I give them some questions to do independently, and then I would circulate round and I get a good sense of the progress they're making, and then I know how long to give them and when I should wrap up that task and start reviewing it. And I'm finding it really hard to judge that when I can only see the front row, and generally I've sat my students who need more support in the front row, so they're going a bit slower than everyone else. So this is something I'm finding more challenging than anything else. I'm exhausted from all the duties, I'm exhausted from the moving between lessons, lots of things I'm finding difficult, but the thing I find hardest is not walking around my classroom. Just standing at the front just feels totally wrong to me. Now, mini whiteboards are one of the many good solutions to this. I still don't think we're ever going to achieve what we can achieve by circulating around the room. I don't think we can get that kind of oversight of our class. Particularly if it's a sort of a exercise that sort of takes a while. We want them to actually sit down and spend some time on some independent work. I don't think we can really achieve that necessarily through mini whiteboards. However, certainly assessing what our students know has always been brilliantly done through mini whiteboards. And if you're lucky enough to be in a school that's allowed you to have these this year, or if your students have them on their planners and you can get them pens, then it's absolutely brilliant for assessing during the lesson. And the good thing about this is some teachers who've never really used mini whiteboards are using them for the first time this year. And some teachers who have always used them are able to kind of share their good practice with their colleagues. This was a tweet recently where a teacher said, "I'm finding it hard without circulating and marking in class. I can't confidently say at the end of the lessons if pupils have understood the topic or not." And then there were some replies to this sharing some really good ideas on how people were tackling this. So, for example, Nikki talks about mini whiteboards and exit tickets. So she uses lots of mini whiteboards in the lesson, but also she gives her students have to write something down as they leave, answer a question, and then she has a quick flick through them after the lesson and she knows whether they've understood. She also is relying a lot more on students saying they've gone wrong, and she knows that some of them don't like admitting to it. So it's about creating that culture of students being able to say. Certainly I'm doing a lot more of who got that right, and I don't normally do that. I don't like to put students on the spot and make them kind of declare in front of everyone what they've got right and wrong, but I am having to say that a lot more this year. Who got that right? But if you have a really safe environment where students can say, actually I didn't get that right and I'm not sure why, and then you can address that in front of the class, that's something that's actually a really positive thing that we should all try and achieve anyway. Other ideas Catherine says that they've got a live marking table in every room, and students can come out and sit at the live marking table with their book, and it's in the front row, so the teacher can kind of see it, and kind of they can see the book even at a distance, and that really helps. She's also using a lot more of diagnostic questions, which I'll talk about in a minute. Now, that live marking table was something I suggested on Twitter as well a little while ago. I suggested that over summer, and actually I haven't been able to do it myself because we just don't have the space. We don't have enough desks in the classrooms to make that work. But it's a really nice idea to have that empty desk at the front, and if someone at the back is stuck, they can just come forward, sit at that desk, get some help, and then return to their seat. So that's a really nice idea. This teacher is using Post-its and a Post-it app, so she gets students to answer 3 or 4 questions in their class workbook and write their answers on Post-its and then bring them to the front. She takes a scan with the app. This app is really clever. It's the Post-it note app. It does really nice things where you can then rearrange the Post-its on your screen and have a play with them and sort them. It's a really nice app. And then she can see exactly who understands and who doesn't. So she's using Post-its for that. This teacher has been using fingers for multiple choice answers, so she'll put a multiple choice question on the board, and then two fingers up if you want the answer B, or 3 fingers up C, etc. She's also doing a lot of cold calling, so picking students even when they haven't got their hand up, so saying no hands up, I'm going to pick people. That's quite a good way of assessing. Obviously hands up is not a good way of assessing because you just get the students who do know the answer. And then she also uses hinge questions, a key question at the end that students mark, and then they indicate how well they've done. Another teacher suggesting solutions to the no circulating issue. Again, multiple choice, hands questions for whole class feedback. So she's using lots of multiple choice where even if you don't have many whiteboards, they can still indicate their answers, which is really helpful. And then he's saying that it's not quite the same impact, but it's a start. So we're all finding ways we're starting to be able to assess in lessons, even if we don't think it's quite as good as what we've done before. Ben is saying that his department have been using exit tickets for the first time, really liking those. Isn't it great that people are trying things out that they've never tried before? It's fantastic. And again, lots of diagnostic questions where if they've got devices in his school, so they're voting on forms. Now, there are lots of activities that lend themselves really well to either whole class discussion or mini whiteboards. So there's lots on variationtheory.com where you can have this. I mean, I use this on the screen and I cold called students to answer. Or mini whiteboards work well with this, but there's a lot more keep the class together teaching going on now. Previously, I've always been someone that's liked to do lots of independent work where I let the students sort of do something on their own and I circulate around. But now it's a lot more labour intensive for the teacher, but I'm keeping the whole class together a lot more. For teachers who aren't confident using mini whiteboards, I do recommend having a look at the standards unit because they make really nice suggestions of activities that work well on mini whiteboards. So there's a activity on writing things algebraically, suggestions of how you could run it on a mini whiteboard, and there's some lovely questions for rounding. So if you're looking for inspiration, the standards unit lessons have got nice suggestions on the sorts of things that work well with mini whiteboards for teachers who've not really used them much before. I mentioned diagnostic questions. That's for your multiple choice. If you go to diagnosticquestions.com, you can get multiple choice questions on absolutely everything in maths. And the questions are always really revealing. They do show us where the misconceptions lie. And it's even if you don't have mini whiteboards in your lessons, the students can vote with their fingers or some other way. They can use something in their planners to vote. And it's really quite revealing for the teacher. So again, lots of people who have known about diagnostic questions for many years but never used them, and now using the opportunity to use these things in their lesson, which means we're all learning, we're all trying new things, figuring out what we like and what we don't like, and we will use those things going forward. So the silver lining to not being able to circulate is that teachers are trying new approaches, and that means they're becoming more expert as teachers. They might not keep doing these things when we can circulate again in the future, but it's great that we're all trying new things. There is a reduction in printing in many classrooms, certainly in mine, which is obviously a good thing. And we're really shining the spotlight on the importance of assessment. As soon as you can't assess your students, you realise how important it is to assess them. As soon as you can't look over their shoulder, you realise how important it was to look over their shoulder. And that, I think, has been really powerful for me. Some other things that teachers have expressed some frustrations and challenges with is about marking. I can't mark their work anymore. In some schools, they're saying you can't actually touch the students' work. Some are saying you can, but you have to leave it for a while. In my school, we're just saying as long as you sanitise your hands, you can mark their work. But a lot of teachers are saying, well, I'm not allowed to touch their stuff, and that means I can't mark anymore. Now, for a long time, marking hasn't been the best solution anyway. We don't want to mark exercise books every lesson, and surprisingly, some schools still insist on that. Self-marking in class has always been a great thing to do. It's more helpful for the students to get their feedback immediately. And online marking at home, using the many tools that are available to maths. We are fortunate in maths that we have lots of platforms that do give instant feedback to students, and if you're lucky enough that your school has access to one of these, then it means that our students get feedback all the time when they do homework, and we don't necessarily need to be marking their homework. And in fact, many schools have been using these for years, not just because we now have these barriers in the way to us marking. And of course, we can write our own assessments using things like Google Forms, and we're all much more au fait with how those things work now. So it's a real opportunity for us to think, in schools where they were marking a lot, I mean, my school has not been one for a long time that has done bookmarking, but in schools where bookmarking was a thing that teachers were expected to do, hopefully they can now move away from that and not come back to it, because we all know it was an absolute time drain on teachers and not particularly effective for students. So the silver lining from this marking thing of not being able to touch the same stuff that students have touched is that marking was never a great idea, marking everything, and there are better ways to give feedback. So this is a really good opportunity for some schools to reevaluate their marking policies. And in maths, we're really lucky to have all these high quality platforms that do the marking for us, and all these other things we can do to really effectively give feedback to our students. So we're really fortunate that we're in a position where things already exist for that. Another thing that's a challenge at the moment is the cancelling of all the lovely conferences. And if you're like me and you absolutely love going to events and you come away feeling really inspired, then that's a bit of a worry, because it's like, I've lost this big part of my job that I really enjoyed. Thankfully, virtual events are absolutely brilliant, and you're all in a virtual event now, so you get that idea, but actually we can learn just as much from online events, and actually it's perhaps better than the situation we had before. Our big silver lining here is that virtual CPD events are cheaper to host and attend. So I think virtual events are here to stay because they save us so much money. The elimination of travel time is a huge win for teachers. There's no way after school I can travel a long way to events, but I can certainly go online from my office and attend them. They're also much more accessible and inclusive. So virtual events can include people all over the world. They can include people who have family responsibilities. Certainly the conferences I went to in the summer term that were online were much more inclusive of teachers who couldn't usually go to events, often because they had young families to care for, but now they're able to attend these events from their own home, which means that CPD is reaching more and more teachers, which is obviously a brilliant thing. And of course, virtual events can be just as high quality as in-person events. There's very little that is lost. There are some things that are lost, but very little is lost from the fact that a seminar or a talk has to be online. So this is a massive opportunity for teachers and for teacher trainers. This is really, really exciting times. So we have all these things that, all these changes happening, and no one likes change, and change is very difficult for all of us. But there are so many opportunities here. It's really exciting. We have opportunities to learn new things. We have opportunities to do things differently and make them better. And we have opportunities to say, well, actually, the way that this school used to do that probably wasn't great. So now we can stop and think, what are we going to do going forward? And that's brilliant. What a fantastic time to change things. There's a couple of tweets that I saw recently that just really kind of inspired me. Mrs. Heppelston says, teaching from the front and staying 1 metre has had unexpected positive effects. My pupils are becoming more resilient and have been able to work through their own barriers. Their questions have been more specific rather than I'm stuck, and my clarifications and questions are much clearer. Now I'm finding this too, and I love this tweet, because I am absolutely finding that when someone says they're stuck and I have to kind of talk across the room to them rather than whisper to them by their side, I'm having to say, tell me what it is you can't do. Whereas previously I'd go and stand next to them and I'd look at it and I'd basically spoon feed it to them. But it's become a better process of communication. So this is fantastic. Mr. West says, I have changed the way I teach over the last 18 months. My style now feels underwhelming from an observational standpoint, but the people seem to be doing better than before. Now, this isn't a COVID thing because he's saying the last 18 months, but look at what he says he's changed. A lot more of him leading from the front, often with his visualizer, modelling and explaining with diagrams, reading text together, and lots more retrieval practice in the form of quizzes and completing diagrams. Activities have disappeared. Now, it's not to say all activities are bad, but what happens is as teachers try new types of teaching, they realise, wow, actually, this is higher impact than I thought it would be. And things that teachers have been told in the past are the wrong way to teach, and they're now realising they're actually, some of these things that were meant to be wrong are actually high impact. So there's a really interesting thing going on at the moment where lots of teachers are trying things and learning from them, and that is fantastic. So if we look on the bright side, I mean, that you could see that this whole year has been absolutely awful from so many perspectives. But if we try and find a silver lining, and if we try and find a bright side about maths teaching in 2020, I guess the big thing is that every teacher in the world is currently upskilling and sharing ideas. There's no teacher in the world that hasn't learned something new this year. Maybe it was how to teach a lesson online, or maybe it's how to stay at the front throughout a lesson. Maybe it's how can I teach without marking, or maybe it's how can I get my students settled and working before I arrive, or perhaps it's how can I assess my students when they're at home and I'm at school and no one's allowed to leave the house. I mean, it has been absolutely bizarre times for all of us, but every teacher in the world has learned new things, and I see so much sharing of ideas and so many teachers reaching out and saying, I don't know how to do this, and people replying saying, let me tell you what I'm trying. It's absolutely brilliant for our development. And obviously it's not ideal and it's not where any of us want to be, but you have to see the bright side of this. We, as a profession, we've got this. We are winning in this situation. We are teaching our students maths, and that's the important thing. And our students are so grateful to be back at school. They may not show it sometimes, but we really are doing the best for our students. We have got this, and we are going to be brilliant. So thank you very much for listening, and have an absolutely fantastic year. Relish the opportunities. You'll be fine with the challenges as long as we all work together. Thank you.